The contractor's hands were shaking when he pulled me aside. "Mr. Hollingsworth, you shouldn't come back alone," Jake whispered, his voice tight with something I'd never heard from a construction worker before. I thought he was overreacting. "My name is Ryan Hollingsworth, and I was just trying to renovate my dead wife's office, turn it into something that didn't remind me of hospital visits and sleepless nights." But Jake had been doing renovations for 23 years, and something in that room had spooked him badly. "I found things hidden in the wall cavity," he said, backing away from my house. "Medical supplies, empty vials. And sir," his voice dropped even lower, "someone's been accessing that room regularly. The dust patterns, the disturbed areas, someone's been using this as a storage space." That conversation happened 3 days ago. What I've discovered since then has destroyed everything I thought I knew about my own son. You know that feeling when you realize the person you trust most has been lying to your face for months? Well, multiply that by discovering they've been slowly poisoning your daughter with your dead wife's leftover cancer medications. If you're watching this, hit subscribe because this story gets so much darker than you think. And I need to know there are people out there who understand that sometimes the monsters live in your own house. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because what happened to my family could happen to yours. This is the story of how my golden child son tried to inherit $38 million by eliminating his sister, and how a sharp-eyed contractor exposed his hiding place. Porter had been the perfect son since childhood. Medical degree from Johns Hopkins, steady demeanor, always knew the right thing to say. After my wife Margaret died from cancer 6 months ago, he stepped right into the caretaker role I apparently couldn't handle. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly," he'd say whenever I questioned something. "Grief affects cognitive function. Let me handle the details." The details included a $38 million estate. Margaret had built Hollingsworth Medical Devices into something extraordinary, and Porter seemed eager to help manage the inheritance. Too eager, maybe, but it was watching him with Kira that first made me uncomfortable. My daughter had been vibrant before Margaret's death, running marketing for a tech startup, always full of energy. Now she could barely get through a day without exhaustion. "It's stress-related," Porter explained to concerned relatives. "Losing Mom hit her harder than anyone. I'm monitoring her condition closely." He used words like monitoring and condition with the confidence of someone who'd graduated summa cum laude. Meanwhile, I was the confused old man who kept asking the same questions. "Why is she losing weight so fast?" "Grief manifests physically, Dad." "These symptoms seem familiar somehow." "You're not a doctor. Let me handle this." The worst part was how everyone agreed with him. Porter was the medical expert. Porter was the responsible one. Porter would take care of everything while poor Ryan processed his loss. Even Kira trusted him completely. "Porter says the fatigue is normal," she'd tell me during our weekly dinners, her voice getting weaker each time. "He's arranging for specialists." I started to feel invisible in my own family, like my 40 years in pharmaceuticals meant nothing compared to Porter's shiny new degree. That feeling was about to change dramatically. 3 weeks after Margaret's funeral, Kira collapsed at work. The call came from Porter, not the hospital. "She's stable," he said, that composed doctor voice already in place. "Severe anemia, likely autoimmune. I'm coordinating her care." I drove straight to Memorial Hospital, but Porter was already there with forms and explanations. Kira looked terrible, pale, thin, dark circles under her eyes that reminded me of Margaret's worst days during chemotherapy. "When did this start?" I asked Kira directly. "It's been gradual," she whispered. "Hair falling out, nausea, no appetite. Porter thinks it might be genetic." Porter nodded gravely. "Cancer can run in families, Dad. Environmental factors. Genetic predisposition. I'm running comprehensive tests." Something cold settled in my stomach. Those symptoms weren't just familiar. They were specific. Hair loss, nausea, anemia. I'd spent 3 years watching Margaret battle those exact same side effects. "What kind of tests?" "Blood work, imaging, genetic markers. It's expensive, but necessary." Expensive. With Porter managing the estate funds, every medical bill went through his approval. Every specialist, every treatment, Every decision filtered through my son's medical expertise. I started keeping a timeline. Margaret died February 15th. Kira's symptoms began the first week of March. Porter took over estate management March 10th. The progression was too neat, too coincidental, but every time I tried to suggest a second opinion, Porter had an answer ready. Dr. Richardson is the best oncologist in the state, Dad. Maybe we should try a different hospital. Moving her now could interrupt treatment protocols. I'd like to see her medical records. Patient confidentiality requires her consent, and Kira's asked me to coordinate everything. The financial stakes were massive. $38 million split between 2 children. But if something happened to Kira, I couldn't finish that thought. Wouldn't let myself think my own son was capable of something so calculated. But Jake the contractor's discovery kept nagging at me. Hidden medical supplies in Margaret's office. Empty vials. Evidence that someone had been using that room as a storage space after her death. Margaret's medical supplies should have been disposed of properly after she passed. Porter had volunteered to handle that too, claiming he knew the correct pharmaceutical disposal protocols. Did you get documentation? I'd asked. Everything was handled professionally, Dad. Don't worry about details. Don't worry about details. Don't ask questions. Don't think too hard about timelines or symptoms or missing medications. Just trust Porter. The thing about working in pharmaceuticals for 40 years is that you learn to trust data over emotions. And the data was starting to paint a picture I desperately didn't want to see. Kira was dying by degrees, and Porter was the only one with access to medications that could cause those exact symptoms. The confrontation happened in Kira's hospital room on a Tuesday morning. She was sleeping, connected to an IV that Porter had specifically requested from the nursing staff. Custom nutrient blend, he explained to the nurse. Her absorption rates are compromised. I waited until the nurse left, then asked the question that had been building for weeks. What exactly is in that IV? Porter looked up from his tablet, that patient expression already forming. Electrolytes, vitamins, anti-nausea medication, standard supportive care. I'd like to see the order sheet. Dad, you're hovering again. Show me the order sheet, Porter. The patients disappeared. For just a moment, I saw something else in his expression. Calculation, annoyance, the look of someone whose plans were being interrupted. You're not thinking clearly since Mom died. My thinking is fine. Show me the orders. Medical decisions require medical training. I have medical training. A business degree and 40 years selling pills doesn't make you a doctor. There it was. The dismissal I'd been feeling for months, finally spoken out loud. Porter saw me as an old man playing with chemistry sets, irrelevant to real medicine. Those pills I sold saved lives. The pharmaceutical industry passed you by years ago, Dad. Did it really? Something in my tone made him look up sharply. I'd kept my voice even, but there was steel underneath that Porter wasn't used to hearing. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know more about drug interactions than you think. You're not a clinician. No, but I know what happens when certain medications are given to healthy people. Porter went very still. Why would you say something like that? Because Jake found empty vials hidden in your mother's office. I disposed of Mom's medications properly. Which medications? All of them. Jake found cisplatin vials. Porter, empty ones. I don't know what you're talking about. Cisplatin is a chemotherapy drug. It causes hair loss, nausea, anemia. Exactly what Kira's experiencing. Porter stood up, moving between me and Kira's bed. The protective stance might have looked caring to an observer, but I recognized it as something else. Territorial. Dad, you're having an episode. Am I? Grief-induced paranoia is common at your age. Your age. There was the real dismissal. Not just my education or experience, but my right to question anything based on how many years I'd been alive. Porter, look me in the eyes and tell me you disposed of those medications properly. He did look me in the eyes. Steady, confident, completely convincing. I followed every protocol, Dad. Everything was handled by professionals. It was a perfect lie, delivered with medical authority and filial concern. If I hadn't spent 4 decades learning to spot pharmaceutical fraud, I might have believed him. But I'd built my career on catching discrepancies, and Porter had just made a critical error. Professional disposal required documentation, tracking numbers, hazardous waste receipts, the kind of paperwork that leaves trails, the kind of trails I knew how to follow. "I believe you," I said quietly. Porter relaxed, thinking he'd won. "Good. Now let's focus on getting Kira better." "Absolutely. That's exactly what I plan to do." I kissed Kira's forehead and left the room. Porter thought he'd dismissed another confused old man. He had no idea he'd just confirmed my worst suspicion to someone who still had connections in very high places. Time to make some phone calls. But first, I needed to examine those vials Jake had found more carefully. Margaret's home office had always been her sanctuary. Medical journals, pharmaceutical patents, correspondence with researchers worldwide. After her death, I'd avoided the room entirely, letting Porter handle the important papers while I dealt with my grief. Now I was seeing it through Jake's eyes. The contractor had been precise about what he'd found. "Behind the drywall near the electrical outlet," he told me, like someone had cut a hole, used the space for storage, then patched it over. I found the patch job easily once I knew where to look. Recent spackling, paint that didn't quite match the original color. Someone had been accessing this hiding spot regularly. Inside the wall cavity, Jake had left everything exactly as he'd found it. 6 empty cisplatin vials, a dozen syringes, still in sterile packaging, and something that made my blood run cold. A detailed dosing chart in Porter's handwriting. The chart showed dates, dosages, and what looked like symptom tracking. March 3rd, initial administration 10 milligauss. March 10th, fatigue noted, increased to 15 milligauss. March 17th, hair loss beginning, maintain dose. Porter had been documenting Kira's poisoning like a clinical trial, but the most damning evidence was Margaret's medication inventory, also in her handwriting. Cisplatin, 12 vials remaining after treatment completion for proper disposal. I counted the empty vials in the wall, 6 used, 6 missing. Porter had been methodically working through Margaret's leftover chemotherapy drugs, administering them to his healthy sister while documenting her decline. I took photos of everything before calling Dr. Margot Fleming, my former research director at Hollingsworth Pharmaceuticals. She'd retired 2 years ago, but her expertise in pharmaceutical forensics was unmatched. "Ryan, I'm so sorry about Margaret. How are you holding up?" "Not well, Margot. I need a favor that's going to sound terrible." "What kind of favor?" "I need someone to test my daughter's blood for platinum compounds, specifically cisplatin metabolites." The silence stretched between us. Margot understood the implications immediately. "Ryan, that's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious situation. Who has access to those medications?" "My son Porter. He's a medical resident." "Bring me a blood sample. Recent draw, proper chain of custody. And Ryan, if this shows what I think you're worried about, we'll need to involve law enforcement immediately." "I know." After hanging up, I sat in Margaret's chair, surrounded by the pharmaceutical knowledge she'd spent decades accumulating. I thought about Porter's confidence, his dismissal of my concerns, his insistence on controlling every aspect of Kira's care. I thought about my daughter, slowly dying from the same chemicals that had failed to save her mother. The dosing chart showed Porter's plan extending through May. Based on the progression, Kira had maybe 6 weeks before the accumulated damage became irreversible. But I had advantages Porter didn't know about. 40 years of connections in pharmaceutical research, expertise in drug metabolism and toxicology, and most importantly, the kind of institutional knowledge that comes from building an industry from the ground up. Porter thought he was dealing with a confused old man who'd been passed by modern medicine. He was about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption was. Tomorrow, I'd get that blood sample from Kira's regular draw. Tonight, I needed to prepare for war. The family dinner was Porter's idea. "Dad needs social interaction," he told relatives. "Isolation isn't healthy during grief recovery." He'd invited 12 people to our house. Margaret's sister Helen, my brother David, longtime family friends, even Dr. Richardson, Kira's oncologist. The timing felt strategic, like Porter was building an audience for something. Kira looked terrible. She'd lost another 15 pounds, her hair now thin enough to show scalp. She sat quietly, picking at her food while Porter explained her condition to concerned guests. Autoimmune disorder with possible genetic components, he said, voice carrying across the dining room. We're seeing encouraging responses to treatment. I watched him work the room like a politician, fielding questions with medical authority and filial devotion, the perfect son, handling a family crisis with professional competence. How fortunate Kira has a brother in medicine, said Margaret's sister. Porter's been amazing, Kira whispered. I don't know what we'd do without him. Family takes care of family, Porter replied, glancing meaningfully at me, especially when some members aren't thinking clearly. The conversation shifted to my recent behavior, how I'd been asking strange questions about medical records, how I seemed confused about treatment protocols, how grief sometimes caused cognitive issues in older adults. It's perfectly normal, Dr. Richardson assured the table. Loss can trigger memory problems, paranoid thinking, difficulty processing complex information. I felt every eye in the room studying me, looking for signs of mental decline. Porter had orchestrated this beautifully, presenting himself as the competent caregiver while establishing my unreliability as established fact. Dad's been having episodes, Porter continued. Yesterday he accused me of hiding medications in Mom's office. He's convinced there's some conspiracy around Kira's illness. Sympathetic murmurs around the table. Helen reached over to squeeze my hand. Grief affects everyone differently, Ryan. The pharmaceutical industry passed him by years ago, Porter added, that dismissive tone I was learning to recognize. He still thinks in terms of old chemistry, not modern medicine. It's causing confusion. That phrase again. The pharmaceutical industry passed him by years ago. Porter had no idea what he'd just said, or who he'd said it to, but Dr. Richardson's head snapped up at those words, his expression shifting from polite agreement to sharp interest. Pharmaceutical industry? Richardson asked, slowly. Dad used to work for a drug company, Porter explained. Middle management, I think, sales or something. The room went quiet. Dr. Richardson was staring at me now, recognition dawning in his eyes. Ryan, he said carefully, what was the name of your company? I could have let it slide, could have played the confused old man Porter had painted me as, but something about watching my son dismiss 40 years of my life in front of people who'd known Margaret made me tired of being invisible. Hollingsworth Pharmaceuticals, I said quietly. Porter looked confused. Dad, you worked for them, not. I founded them, I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the sudden silence. Built it from a 3-person lab to 1,200 employees. Sold it to Meridian in 2019. For $180 million. You could have heard a pin drop. Dr. Richardson's face had gone completely white. You're that Ryan Hollingsworth, the Hollingsworth from the cancer research protocols. Among other things. Porter was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Dad, you never said you never asked. You were too busy explaining how the industry had passed me by. I looked around the table at faces ranging from shocked to embarrassed. Margaret's friends knew about the pharmaceutical company, but they'd assumed I was just a beneficiary of her success, not the other way around. How many patents do you hold, Ryan? Dr. Richardson asked, his professional demeanor completely changed. 23 active compounds, 17 manufacturing processes, 6 diagnostic protocols. Porter's mouth was opening and closing without sound. His entire narrative about confused old dad was crumbling in real time. The Hollingsworth protocol for platinum-based therapies, Richardson continued. I use it every day. You wrote the standard for cisplatin administration and monitoring. I helped write it, yes. Porter finally found his voice. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him across the table, this son who'd been patronizing me for months, who'd dismissed my concerns about his sister's mysterious illness, who thought pharmaceutical knowledge was something you learned from textbooks. You said I wouldn't understand modern medicine. The silence stretched until Helen cleared her throat. Well, this certainly explains a lot about Margaret's success. Margaret built her own empire, I said firmly. I just provided some foundation. But the damage to Porter's credibility was done. Everyone was looking at him now, wondering what else he'd gotten wrong about his own father. Porter excused himself early, claiming he needed to check on some of Kira's test results. I watched him leave, knowing that tomorrow I'd have Margot's blood analysis. The real conversation was about to begin. Margot's call came at 7 in the morning, 3 days after the dinner party that changed everything. "Ryan, you need to sit down." "I'm sitting." Kira's blood work shows significant platinum compound concentrations, specifically cisplatin metabolites consistent with regular exposure over the past 4 months. The confirmation hit like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. "How much?" "Enough to cause everything you described. Hair loss, anemia, nausea, immune suppression. Someone has been systematically administering chemotherapy drugs to a healthy person." "Can you prove the timeline?" "Blood metabolites show recent exposure, probably within the last week. But Ryan, this isn't just medical evidence we need. This is attempted murder. We need administration method, opportunity, and motive." "I've got all three. I'd been preparing for that conversation since the moment Jake showed me Porter's hiding place. 3 days of careful investigation, using connections Porter didn't know existed. First, I'd contacted Janet Morrison, head of security at Westfield Pharmacy, where Margaret had received her prescriptions. Janet owed me favors from my consulting work on their fraud prevention system. "Ryan, I pulled those disposal records myself. No one from your family brought in any chemotherapy drugs for destruction. But here's what's interesting. Porter Hollingsworth has been picking up medical supplies monthly since March. Syringes, IV equipment, even requesting special sterile water for home administration. Second, Dr. Patricia Vance from Memorial Hospital's toxicology lab had agreed to review Kira's blood work with fresh eyes, specifically looking for patterns that suggested external administration rather than disease progression. "The liver enzyme patterns are all wrong for autoimmune disease," she told me. "This looks like platinum poisoning, but the regular intervals suggest careful dosing, not accidental exposure." Third, and most damning, was security footage from Kira's apartment building. I'd spoken with the building manager, claiming concern about my daughter's safety during her illness. "Your son visits twice weekly," the manager told me. "Always carries a medical bag, stays about an hour. Very professional, very caring." The timing coincided perfectly with Kira's symptom escalations. "I have him on video," I told Margot. 4 months of regular visits, medical bag in hand, followed by documented health decline. That's still circumstantial without knowing what's in the bag. I know what's in the bag. The breakthrough had come from Margaret's personal files, which Porter had overlooked during his cleanup of her office. Hidden behind her medical journals, I'd found a handwritten log that broke my heart. Margaret had been suspicious too. Her notes included inventory tracking that didn't match Porter's disposal claims, and a memo dated just 2 weeks before she died. "Ask Ryan about P's questions regarding inheritance probate and medical power of attorney procedures." She'd noticed Porter's unusual interest in estate law during her final illness. She'd documented his questions about what happened to medical decision-making rights when patients became incapacitated. She'd been building a case before she died, but the most crucial evidence came from Porter's own records. "I found his medical school transcripts," I told Margot. "He took advanced pharmacology courses, including a specialized unit on platinum-based compounds. He knows exactly what cisplatin does to the human body." "What about motive?" "His medical school loans are in default. $485,000, with the bank threatening legal action. The only way he avoids bankruptcy is through inheritance." The financial investigation revealed the full scope of Porter's desperation. He'd been living beyond his means throughout medical school, financing an expensive lifestyle with borrowed money. The debt payments alone required more income than a resident physician could earn. $38 million split 2 ways instead of 3, I continued. Plus, he'd been stealing Margaret's prescription medications during her illness, selling them to fund his expenses. "How do you know about the prescription theft?" "I found his dealer contacts in his laptop. That discovery had happened by accident. Porter had left his computer at the house during one of his visits to check on Dad. I'd been looking for evidence of his pharmaceutical knowledge when I stumbled across encrypted messages discussing surplus pain medications and reliable supply chains. Porter hadn't just been planning Kira's murder since Margaret's funeral. He'd been committing pharmaceutical fraud for years. This isn't just attempted murder, I told Margot. It's medical fraud, prescription drug dealing, and elder abuse. What's your next move? I'm going to give Porter a chance to confess. Ryan, that's dangerous. If he's willing to poison his sister, he won't hurt me. Too obvious, too public. Besides, I won't be going alone. The confrontation was set for Saturday morning at Kira's apartment. I told Porter I wanted to discuss coordinating her treatment plan and asked him to bring his medical supplies. I had questions about her home care routine. I arrived early and called Detective Sarah Brooks from the Financial Crimes Unit. She'd agreed to listen to our conversation through a concealed wire, ready to intervene if necessary. What's the signal if you need immediate help? She asked. I'll say Margaret would be proud. That means move in immediately. But Porter arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, medical bag in hand, confidence restored after several days to process the dinner party revelation. He'd probably convinced himself that my pharmaceutical background actually worked in his favor. Who better to understand his sophisticated medical approach? Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about your experience with platinum compounds. Have you? Maybe we should collaborate on Kira's treatment. Combine your theoretical knowledge with my clinical training. Interesting proposal. I gestured toward his medical bag. What's today's treatment plan? Supportive care, IV nutrients, symptom management, immune system support? Show me. Porter opened the bag with complete confidence, laying out syringes and vials like a vendor displaying merchandise. Everything looked professionally prepared, clearly labeled, completely legitimate. Except I knew what to look for now. The immune support vial contained a slightly cloudy solution instead of the clear liquid indicated on the label. The prepared syringe contained exactly the wrong volume for any legitimate medication. And most damning, the nutritional supplement had the distinctive metallic scent that cisplatin solutions developed after preparation. Very professional setup, I said. Margaret would have been impressed. I learned attention to detail from watching her. She certainly was thorough, always documented everything. Yes, she was very systematic. I looked directly at Porter, the son who'd been systematically poisoning his sister while maintaining the facade of caring medical professional. Porter, I have just one question before we continue. What's that? How long did you think it would take me to figure out you've been administering chemotherapy drugs to your healthy sister? His expression went through several changes in rapid succession: confusion, realization, calculation, and finally, cold acceptance. I don't know what you're talking about. The blood analysis says otherwise. So does your dosing chart. So do the pharmacy records showing you never disposed of Mom's medications. Dad, you're having another episode. The only episode happening here is the end of your medical career. Detective Brooks chose that moment to knock on the door. The interrogation room at Baltimore County Police was smaller than I'd expected, but it gave me a clear view of Porter through the one-way glass. Detective Brooks had allowed me to observe, given my role in building the case. Porter looked composed, almost clinical, as he reviewed the evidence spread across the metal table. Blood analysis results, security footage, pharmacy records, Margaret's hidden notes, financial documents showing his debt crisis. This is quite comprehensive, he said to Detective Brooks and Assistant District Attorney Linda Chen. Very professionally assembled. Your father spent considerable time building this case, Brooks replied. I'm sure he did. Dad always was methodical. They were giving Porter a chance to confess before formal charges were filed. Standard procedure, but I knew my son well enough to predict his response. I'd like to explain my perspective, Porter said, leaning forward slightly. My sister was genuinely ill, complex autoimmune presentation. The supportive care I provided was exactly that, supportive. Supportive care doesn't include cisplatin, Ada Chen pointed out. I never administered cisplatin to my sister. The blood analysis indicates otherwise. Blood analysis can show environmental exposure from many sources. Kira spent considerable time in our mother's office during her final illness. Residual pharmaceutical contaminations entirely plausible. I had to admire his strategy. Porter was systematically attacking each piece of evidence with medical explanations that sounded plausible to laypeople. Environmental exposure, coincidental symptoms, misinterpreted data. But he'd made one critical error. Detective Brooks opened a new file. We also have testimony from Memorial Hospital regarding your specific requests for medications and equipment. Standard protocols for home care, including requests for cisplatin. Porter paused for just a moment. I may have inquired about various treatment options. That's responsible medical consultation. On March 15th, you specifically asked Dr. Richardson about obtaining cisplatin for home administration. You claimed your sister had requested your mother's exact treatment protocol. Patients often request familiar treatments when facing similar diagnoses. But your sister doesn't have cancer, does she, Porter? Autoimmune conditions can... Your sister has platinum poisoning, deliberately administered over 4 months by someone with medical training who had access to the specific drugs found in her system. Porter's composed facade was beginning to crack. That's speculation. We also have your financial records, Ada Chen continued. Medical school loans in default. Bankruptcy proceedings initiated the week after your mother died. Power of attorney documents giving you control over your sister's medical decisions if she became incapacitated. Financial stress doesn't prove criminal behavior. But it establishes a motive. $38 million inheritance split between 2 siblings instead of 3. Plus elimination of your debt obligations through estate distribution. Porter looked directly at the one-way mirror as if he could see me watching. Where's my father? I'd like to speak with him. Brooks and Chen exchanged glances. Why do you want to speak with your father? Because he's the only person in this building who actually understands pharmaceutical mechanisms of action. That was the break I'd been waiting for. Porter's arrogance was finally overcoming his caution. He's asking for you, Brooks told me through the intercom. Do you want to go in? Yes, but I want everything recorded. They brought me into the interrogation room where Porter was sitting with his hands folded, looking more like a medical conference presenter than a suspected criminal. Dad, I was wondering when you'd show yourself. I've been here the whole time, Porter. Watching through the glass. Very dramatic. I sat down across from him, noting how his eyes tracked my movements with clinical precision. Even now, he was studying me like a case study. I have to ask, I said. Why Kira? Why not just wait for your inheritance? You really want to know? I really want to know. Porter leaned back, and for the first time since his arrest, he looked genuinely relaxed. Kira was going to contest the will. That hit me like a physical blow. What? She found discrepancies in Mom's final medical bills, treatment costs that didn't match insurance claims. She was asking questions about estate accounting that would have revealed financial irregularities going back years. What kind of irregularities? Porter smiled, the expression cold and satisfied. I've been managing Mom's prescription medication since her diagnosis, Dad. Not just for her treatment, but for supplemental income. High-value pharmaceuticals have excellent resale markets. The room went silent. Porter hadn't just been planning Kira's death since Margaret's funeral. He'd been stealing from our dying wife for years. Mom's pain medications, I said. Oxycodone, fentanyl patches, morphine. More than she could possibly use, with prescription refills that insurance covered automatically. Medical professionals have easy access and established trust. While she was dying, while she was getting more prescriptions than medically necessary, I saw an opportunity and managed it efficiently. And when Kira discovered the theft? Kira found out because she's thorough. Like you, apparently, she would have destroyed everything I'd worked for. So you tried to destroy her first. Porter shrugged. I tried to solve the problem with minimal collateral damage, gradual onset, mimicking natural disease progression. If you hadn't interfered, she would have simply declined peacefully. No suspicion, no investigation. Detective Brooks was writing frantically. Ada Chen looked like she was watching a wildlife documentary about predators. Any other confessions you'd like to make? I asked. Just one. I genuinely respected your pharmaceutical knowledge, Dad. This investigation was expertly conducted. Thank you. You're welcome. Now, I'd like to speak with my attorney." As they led Porter away, he turned back one final time. "For what it's worth, I never planned to hurt you." "Why not? You weren't a threat. Until now." Porter's arrest made the morning news within 6 hours. Local medical resident charged with attempted murder of sister ran on every Baltimore station, followed by the more sensational pharmaceutical heir's shocking family betrayal in the evening coverage. The details that emerged during his bond hearing were worse than I'd imagined. Detective Brooks called me the day after Porter's confession. "We've been through his apartment and found detailed journals documenting the entire process. Your son kept records like he was conducting a clinical trial." "What kind of records?" "Dosing schedules, symptom progression, even photographs of your daughter's declining health. He documented everything as if it were legitimate medical research." The journals revealed the methodical mind of someone who saw murder as a problem-solving exercise. Porter had calculated dosing based on Kira's body weight, tracked her symptoms to ensure progression appeared natural, and even prepared explanations for various potential complications. "He was prepared to escalate if the cisplatin approach failed," Brooks explained. "We found insulin supplies from diabetic patients in his residency program, plus research on overdose protocols. Backup plans. Multiple backup plans. Your intervention probably saved your daughter's life by weeks, not months. Kira's recovery began immediately once the poisoning was identified." Dr. Patricia Vance took over her care, implementing chelation therapy to remove residual platinum from her system and supportive treatments to restore her compromised immune function. "The encouraging news is that she's young and previously healthy," Dr. Vance told me during Kira's 3rd week in the hospital. "Her body is responding excellently to detoxification, hair will regrow, anemia is resolving, appetite is returning." "Long-term effects?" "We'll monitor kidney function for the next year, but I don't expect permanent damage." Porter was careful to avoid immediately fatal doses. Ironically, that worked in Kira's favor for recovery. Careful. The word left a bitter taste. My son had been careful while slowly murdering his sister. The legal consequences unfolded rapidly. Porter was charged with attempted murder in the 1st degree, pharmaceutical fraud, theft of controlled substances, elder abuse during Margaret's illness, and financial exploitation. His medical license was suspended immediately pending criminal proceedings. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of his crimes. Over 3 years, Porter had diverted approximately $200,000 worth of Margaret's prescription medications to illegal resale markets. The money had funded his medical school lifestyle, apartment rent, and what investigators described as substantial recreational expenses. He was living like a successful physician while still in training, Ada Chen explained during a pretrial conference. The pharmaceutical theft was financing an image he couldn't afford legitimately. Porter's defense attorney tried to argue diminished capacity due to grief and stress, but the detailed journals destroyed any claim of impaired judgment. The systematic nature of his planning, the careful dosing calculations, and the multiple backup murder methods demonstrated clear intent and premeditation. "These aren't the actions of someone in crisis," the prosecutor argued during bail hearings. "This is calculated, methodical planning by someone who used medical knowledge to harm family members systematically." Bail was denied. The social consequences were equally devastating. Porter's medical school classmates distanced themselves immediately. His residency program issued statements about their shock and disappointment. Former colleagues published social media posts expressing disbelief at his actions. But the most significant consequence was the complete destruction of our family structure. "I can't believe I trusted him with my life," Kira said during one of our daily hospital visits. "All those months I thought he was trying to help." Porter was very convincing. "How did I miss it? The signs must have been there." Porter spent years learning to manipulate medical situations. You trusted someone with professional credentials who claimed to love you. That's rational behavior, not naivety. Still feels stupid in hindsight. Hindsight makes everyone feel stupid. The important thing is recognizing warning signs if this ever happens again. What warning signs should I watch for? I developed a mental list during the months since Porter's arrest. Anyone who discourages second opinions, anyone who insists on controlling medical information, anyone who uses professional credentials to shut down questions rather than answer them, anyone who tells you that your concerns are signs of cognitive decline, especially that one. We were both learning to process the reality that Porter had never been the person we thought he was. The caring brother, the responsible son, the dedicated medical professional, all had carefully constructed personas designed to facilitate manipulation and theft. The media attention brought unexpected opportunities. 3 pharmaceutical companies reached out about consulting roles. 2 medical schools requested guest lectures about detecting medical fraud within families. A documentary producer wanted to interview me about pharmaceutical crimes and domestic situations. I declined most offers, but accepted one. A partnership with the Baltimore County Police to develop training programs for detecting pharmaceutical crimes in domestic situations. Your case isn't unique, Detective Brooks told me. Medical professionals using their knowledge to harm family members is more common than people realize. We need experts who understand both the chemistry and the psychology. Margaret would have approved. She'd always believed that pharmaceutical knowledge carried moral obligations along with professional opportunities. 6 weeks after Porter's arrest, I was cleaning out his apartment under police supervision when I found one final piece of evidence, a draft letter addressed to me. "Dad," it began, "if you're reading this, it means my financial situation became untenable before I could resolve it through inheritance management. I want you to know that I genuinely respected your pharmaceutical expertise, even if I didn't always show it. You taught me more about drug mechanisms than medical school ever could. Unfortunately, you also taught me enough to recognize what I was doing to Kira. I hope you can understand that I saw no other options given my debt obligations and career requirements. The inheritance was necessary for reasons beyond simple greed. I've documented other financial irregularities that may require your attention after my arrest. Despite everything, I never wanted to disappoint you. Porter." The other financial irregularities included evidence that Porter had been forging Margaret's signature on insurance claims and Medicare reimbursements during her final illness. The scheme was worth an additional $50,000 in fraudulent medical billing. Even his confession letter contained new crimes. I gave the letter to Detective Brooks and ADA Chen. It became evidence item number 89 in a case that ultimately resulted in Porter's conviction on all charges and a sentence of 25 years to life in state prison. The day of sentencing, I sat in the courtroom gallery and watched my son accept responsibility for his actions with the same clinical detachment he'd shown throughout the investigation. He never looked at me. He never apologized to Kira. He simply acknowledged the facts and accepted the consequences like they were medical test results he couldn't argue with. 8 months after Porter's conviction, Kira moved back into her apartment with a clean bill of health and a perspective on family relationships that would protect her for the rest of her life. Her hair had grown back completely, thick, dark, and healthy. The weight she'd lost during Porter's systematic poisoning had returned along with her energy and optimism. Most importantly, the haunted expression she'd carried during those terrible months had been replaced by something stronger and more cautious. "I've been thinking about Mom's foundation," she told me during our weekly dinner at her place. "The medical research grants, the pharmaceutical safety programs. What about them? I want to expand them, add a division focused on medical fraud prevention and family protection protocols." It was a perfect tribute to Margaret's memory and a meaningful way to channel our experience into something that could protect other families from what we'd endured. "The Hollingsworth Foundation for Medical Safety," I suggested. "I like that. Will you help me develop the pharmaceutical oversight programs?" "Absolutely." We spent the evening planning initiatives that would provide resources for families dealing with medical professionals who abuse their positions of trust. Educational materials about recognizing pharmaceutical manipulation, support networks for victims of medical fraud, training programs for law enforcement agencies dealing with domestic pharmaceutical crimes, The work gave us both a sense of purpose beyond the trauma we'd survived. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think we missed signs earlier? Warning signs that Porter was capable of this? I'd been asking myself the same question for months. I think Porter was very good at showing people what they wanted to see. We saw a dedicated medical student who honored Margaret's professional interests. But underneath, he was already stealing Mom's medications. Underneath, he was someone who saw family members as resources rather than relationships. How do you tell the difference? Watch how people respond when their authority gets questioned. Porter dismissed my pharmaceutical knowledge instead of respecting it. He shut down your concerns about your health instead of investigating them. He used his medical training to avoid accountability. Exactly. Real medical professionals welcome informed questions. They don't use credentials to silence discussion. Our relationship had been fundamentally changed by the experience, but in ways that made us both stronger. The crisis had forced us to communicate more directly, to trust each other's judgment, and to establish protective boundaries against future manipulation. Kira had developed expertise in medical advocacy and patient rights. She now insisted on controlling her own medical records, getting second opinions for any significant health concerns, and questioning treatment recommendations that seemed unusual or aggressive. "I'm never again letting someone else make medical decisions for me," she'd told me after Porter's sentencing. "That's healthy skepticism." Is there such a thing as unhealthy skepticism? When it prevents you from accepting help you actually need. The goal is informed caution, not paranoid isolation. I'd learned to be more direct about my concerns instead of assuming family loyalty would prevent harmful behavior. The quiet investigation approach had worked in Porter's case, but I'd resolved to speak up immediately if I ever suspected family members were taking advantage of each other. "Do you ever miss him?" Kira asked one evening. "I miss the person I thought he was, the son who cared about medicine and family, but that person never really existed. Sometimes I feel guilty for not seeing through his act." Porter fooled medical professionals with decades more experience than you. His deception was sophisticated and systematic. Still feels like I should have known. Porter spent years learning how to manipulate medical situations. You trusted a trained professional who claimed to love you. There's no shame in that. The foundation work was progressing well. We'd received initial funding from 3 pharmaceutical companies and endorsements from medical associations concerned about professional misconduct. The educational materials were being reviewed by experts in forensic psychiatry and pharmaceutical law. Most importantly, we were creating resources that could help other families recognize and respond to medical manipulation before it became life-threatening. "Dad, I want to thank you for saving my life. You don't need to thank me for being your father. I need to thank you for being the kind of father who noticed when something was wrong and did something about it. I should have acted sooner. You acted when you had proof. That's what made the case strong enough to convict him. Still wish I'd trusted my instincts earlier." That your instincts were fighting against 40 years of pharmaceutical knowledge that told you medical professionals don't harm patients. Except when they do. Except when they do. If you're watching this and you've recognized concerning patterns in your own family's medical care, trust your instincts. Ask questions. Get second opinions. Don't let professional credentials silence legitimate concerns about treatments that seem aggressive or unusual. Medical knowledge should protect people, not harm them. And sometimes the people we need protection from are the ones who claim to love us most. Subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Your story might help someone else recognize the warning signs before it's too late.